a good start. Welcome to today's meeting of the Health and Social Care Select Committee at the London Borough of Hillingdon. This meeting is being broadcast on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon London. The purpose of this committee is to monitor services provided by health partners and adult social care and review their performance. We also undertake in-depth reviews and witness sessions on specific topics and submit our findings to the decision-making cabinet. My name is Councillor Nick Denys and I'm the chairman of this committee. Before we start, I have some important housekeeping for everyone present. Please ensure that any mobile phones around you are on silent. We're not expecting a fire drill, so if the fire alarm goes off, please follow Nikki wherever she goes. Please keep your microphone muted when you're not speaking, and then unmute to speak, and as chairman I shall call those to speak during the meeting. Excellent, fantastic. So we'll move on to the agenda. Nikki, do we have any apologies for absence?
Chairman, we've had apologies for absence from Councillor Adam Bennett, and Councillor Peter Smallwood is here as his substitute.
Welcome, Peter. Pleasure to have you. Declarations of interest? No. Excellent, fantastic. And now we come to the minutes of the meeting on the 10th of October. Are there any comments on the minutes? No. Philip?
Not a correction, just a question, if I may, and that relates to point 30 around the assisted living technology, a point which I raised at the end of the meeting, and I wondered what had transpired on that query, please.
Okay, so my understanding is we're going to get a written report update on it, and then after that it's for us to decide whether we want to bring it to a meeting as an agenda item or not. So that's what I've been told. I obviously, as I wasn't involved in the review, I don't have a strong opinion on that, but I know you were, Philip. I mean, what's your view on that?
Well, I always think if we're doing these major reviews and they sit with us, if we're not going to look at them from time to time, one wonders what the point is, quite frankly. So I would welcome a report on it, and we can then consider where we might want to take it beyond that. I would suggest, if that's okay. Yeah.
Chairman, sorry, I've just found a note on it. So Matthew Wallbridge is going to be doing a briefing note for members to update them on what's going on. Sorry, thank you.
Obviously, after we see the briefing note, we can decide whether we want it to come here as an agenda item. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Brilliant. But apart from that, the minutes are agreed. Yeah.
Agreed.
Fantastic. Okay, so we move to our first of our two main items, which is item number 5, the Carers Strategy Delivery Update. And here to present on that we have Gary Collier, who's Health and Social Care Integration Manager here at London Borough of Hillingdon, and he's joined by Richard Ellis, who's Joint Lead Borough Director, North West London Integrated Care System, or ICS as we like to call it. So, Gary, you're starting, aren't you?
Thank you, Chairman. This report is the annual report that precedes the annual report to Cabinet on the delivery of the carers strategy. The committee may recall that it agreed at the meeting last year, when it considered an update, that it would actually consider the update on an annual cycle. I'm not going to. The committee will probably be pleased to know. Read through the report in detail. There's just a few points that I'd actually like to highlight. Firstly, actually, to apologise for the size of the report, and I make a commitment that this will not be repeated in future. It is of such a size this time because it actually contains the draft strategy. And also you'll see that it actually contains case studies, which, with the committee's permission, I will continue to do in future, because the purpose behind it is really to basically to make it real, to coin a phrase. The report that goes to Cabinet will not include that and will be briefer. The report that the draft report on the strategy that the committee received last year outlines the vision, mission statements, and outcomes. What you've actually got appended to this report is the actual draft strategy. What we've done ahead of that, as you will see in the report, is aligned the the delivery plan for 2022-23 and for 23-24 to the outcomes within the draft strategy. Just to highlight a couple of points firstly around information sources, and what I've done, as you can see within the report, is there is some repetition from what I included in the report last year, because I thought that the committee may actually find it useful to see that again, because it is such a long time since you've seen this information. So where I've gone into details about definitions, so who do we mean by carer? The last report that you saw didn't actually have quite as much data in, largely because it wasn't available at the time. So since the last report, we've had the 2021 census, which did actually identify, contrary to expectations, a reduction in the number of carers. And Hillingdon's experience there is no different to the national picture. And ONS, the Office for National Statistics, has basically outlined a view that's probably attributable to when the census actually took place, which was actually on in lockdown conditions. And there was issues around the changes to the questions that were actually being asked. As you can see within the report, I've set out some of the data sources, and one of the key ones is reference to the short and long term services return that adult social care is required to do on an annual basis. Important point to highlight, because it's actually relevant to some of the performance information that I refer to in a moment, is that this is actually quite restrictive in who it actually refers to and who it includes. So the people actually included within the data set as part of this return will only be those carers who have actually had a carers assessment. What is in progress at the moment is a change to what's called client level data, which will actually ask a much broader range of information from people who are identified as carers, not necessarily people who've had carers assessments. So that will eventually actually provide us with much more useful information about people who actually have carers. We know within the data set that we already have that there's a number of people identified as having a main carer, but we don't necessarily have a lot of information about those people. The move to the client level data will actually change that situation. We won't actually be able to get the audited data until probably October, November next year, which will be roughly probably the time that we actually manage to get comparative data with other local authorities. So we'll be able to benchmark ourselves certainly against our neighbours. What we will have this year, and it's due to be published imminently, is the SALT returns for 22-23. So we will the information that will be presented next year will probably still present some of those key issues until we're in a position to be able to access that more detailed data that will be comparing like for like across other local authorities. What you can hopefully see within the report, that there has actually been a lot of positive activity. What we've actually tried to do, certainly with 22-23 and more so with 23-24, is include actions which within the delivery plan that are over and above business as usual. And a lot of those activities will be delivered through the Hillingdon Carers Partnership, for which Carers Trust Hillingdon is the lead provider. And so some of that information is actually contained within the report. I'll move on to the strategy, which, as I say, is appended to the document. This is really seeking to address some of the key issues which really are no different to what we've actually dealt with before, which is sort of identification of carers, identification of carers from unrepresentative groups, looking at how parent carers are recognised and supported, identifying carers through primary care, which you'll see earlier is the reference to the carer leads in GP practices, where we were doing very well before the pandemic, and actually went backwards, and now are making progress. Wanting to get to a position where we have carer leads in all of the practices, but the reality is that's unlikely to be. Well, it's not unlikely; it won't be achieved this year. One point I think I wanted to raise again about some of the performance data, which you'll see later in the report on 18/19, where this again is actually looking at the information from the SALT data. So what's not taken into consideration with this are basically those people who are supported via the carer support service, and also the numbers of carers that actually decline to have a carer's assessment and therefore not counted as part of the SALT data, but may still actually get support from the through the carer support service contract. I'll leave it there, Chairman, for any comments or questions that the committee may have.
Thank you very much. I thought it was an excellent paper, really interesting, really detailed, and essentially I think I understood it, which is probably what a paper should be, really, and I enjoyed reading it. So thank you for that. But my sort of first question touches on something you mentioned about lots of good activities happening, and that's very true, and this comes out of the paper. But what I wonder, I didn't really get from the paper, is this good stuff that has been put together sort of inside one bucket, or is this stuff that happens because of the strategy and because of, to use my rather bad analogy, of the bucket itself? Because when I look at the sort of aims under page 27, very good, but they're really high level, but excellent aims at really high level. But I don't really have any understanding of how this sort of success will be judged, how it will be driven, and how the strategy itself makes it happen beyond the fact we have lots of different good people doing good things in order to sort of help people who people know need helping. So I suppose, can you explain to me a bit more about how this strategy actually improves this and can help deliver what's on page 27?
Well, some of the actions that are actually set out, I think from pages 45, and then within the delivery plan, are intended to help contribute to the delivery of some of those of those aims. I think certainly one of the difficulties that we have with this is around monitoring success. It's the metrics, and it's that dilemma that you have between identifying metrics that where the data is easy to collect and analyse without against the cost of actually doing so. So, Chairman, I mean, what we've actually got within the as I say, within the delivery plan are actions that are intended to actually contribute to meeting those objectives. What we've already got in place, I think, is certainly with the carers support service, is a successful model. It's actually providing the main part of our offer to young carers. It is actually being successful in attracting external funding, which is increasing the range of short break options available to carers of all ages, and also enabling or addressing, I think, the point about actually addressing the shortfall in income that carers sometimes or invariably face when undertaking a caring role.
So I think the actions, on in Annex 2, yeah, you're right, they're very clearly laid out. But the question I suppose I have about them, I don't question any of them individually, is how were they created? Were they created by a group, or were they created by the individual lead organisations and happened to be what the individual lead organisations were doing, which is absolutely fine? And secondly, as well, who are the actions accountable to? So let's say I pick a random one, 1.7, establish a colleague as a carer support group as part of Hillingdon Hospital Staff Wellbeing Workstream. Hillingdon Hospital, of course, are the lead organisation. This should be done over the next year. Is Hillingdon, who's accountable for that happening? Is it Hillingdon Hospital's responsibility? If they don't do it, does anything happen? So that's why I was trying to. Are these created? How are these created? Do people come to a meeting and say this is what we're doing, and it gets put into the bucket, or is it all part of this strategy which is meant to sort of try and improve what we're delivering in order to get to 27? And if it doesn't happen, where's that accountability of what doesn't happen?
Some of the actions are driven by national policy. So some of the things that Hillingdon Hospital are doing are driven partly by national policy, but also by some of the feedback that they've actually had from carers. So one of the actions that's included within there, which is a bit of both, is the around the Cerner information system and actually attaching the carer flag to that. So improving their information system, because at the moment the hospital has different information systems across the hospital. The system that they're introducing will actually create a single system across the whole of the hospital, and adding this will then create that flag, so to help identify carers, because that's one of the key issues again that's identified within the strategy. So I think in all fairness, some of what's actually in here isn't new because the issues aren't new. They would have appeared in previous strategies. They've just probably written in a slightly different way. There are new drivers that are actually coming from central government, but there's also what we're actually being told by carers. But actually some of the things that we're being told by carers now isn't really that much different to what carers were saying a few years ago.
Richard, you had your hand up, so.
Thank you, Chair. I think you put your finger on it when you used the analogy of the bucket, and I think that idea of an all-encompassing vessel to collect carers' interests and carers' priorities and to see that we are doing something about it is a really important one. And since I've been working in Hillingdon, I've really respected the commitment by the local authority to recognise carers' priorities and carers' interests, in particular young carers, and we might want to talk about that a little later on. And I think what Gary was touching on, and what I would absolutely endorse, is that we are in a way in an interesting position for statutory organisations of not having national targets for carers strategy, and God knows we've got enough national targets on other parts of our business that we try desperately to deliver on. and that therefore we are precisely driven by what local carers, local communities, local organisations are telling us should be the priorities to meet their needs, which is absolutely where strategy should begin. And, of course, we're trying to carve out resources that would otherwise be going to meet statutory targets to meet those. So I think, as it were, the first order of the priorities is absolutely met, and from what I hear from the voluntary organisations and from individuals, we're more or less getting things right and doing things as they need. I think the second order point, your point about the accountability, the measurability, the holding each other to account and carers being able to hold each other to account, probably does need revisiting. And I think it might be something that we pick up with Hillingdon Health and Care Partners, because clearly the carers trust Hillingdon, and Age UK are important members of Age for All within HHCP. But I think the work that this report measures and reflects is actually that a lot of progress has been done, and more to the point, we know where progress hasn't yet been made. And I've taken away some specific actions that Gary was identifying about the primary care networks and the general practices that I suspect even 5 years ago we might not have been in a position to be saying those are the things that it's important for carers to take advantage of. So I absolutely welcome your point, Chair, and maybe it's something that we can take away and recommend to HHCP for.
Thank you. Richard actually reminded me of the second part of your question. Just to say, so the governance structure for the Hillingdon Health and Care system is actually included within here. So, which is on.
It's Annex C.
Yeah.
Annex 3, sorry.
Yes. So page 59. So what will happen is that the action plan or progress on the action plan will be reported through this system. So the Carer Strategy Group is the body that actually holds responsibility for it, and that's then reported through and all partners actually have representation on that group. And it is then taken through the different bodies within the governance structure.
Can I just interrupt you briefly, just so, because I know other people want to ask questions. I don't want to hog the whole meeting, but when you look at Annex 3, there's arrows going one way, then there's an end. So is there reporting, and then what happens? Then like, okay, fine. Then reporting. Where is that accountability? I don't really see I see the reporting structure in the annex. I don't see the accountability. Right. So, for example, if the Health and Wellbeing Board says, well, the Health and Wellbeing Board doesn't really come up with motions, does it? But if some issues are discussed, then obviously the different partners probably take them away. But it doesn't. There isn't any. The carer strategy have to get permission from, let's say, the council's cabinet, or the council's cabinet says, no, actually you're not doing this right or doing this wrong, or which means where is the accountability? It's sort of reporting, which might not be a bad thing. I'm not, Richard. I'm not advocating for new national targets, by the way, because you guys have enough. But that's, I suppose, where I was coming from with the accountability point.
I think, Rich, within Hillingdon Health and Care Partners, the body that actually has the accountability would be the delivery board, Health and Care Partners Delivery Board.
Okay, thanks. That's good to know. Right, I'll let some other people come in, because otherwise I don't want to dominate the meeting too much. So, Philip, you had your hand up first. Anyone else?
Perish thought, Chairman. Gary, thank you, and Richard, for your comments. I mean, a very good report, and you're right, Gary. There's a lot here that isn't new, and much of this I'm familiar with from cabinet days, and we've discussed this many times, more times than I care to think about. Although it's always a pleasure. But I do have a question, I suppose, perhaps a few years on from where I was, because clearly the IC Integrated Care Partnership has come into being, and it's been developing and maturing in more recent years. And I just wonder, perhaps, whether you can say a little bit more about how the pattern of service demand and delivery is perhaps changing. There's talk about a greater push for direct payments, and whether perhaps that presents challenges and opportunities in terms of market development. So I suppose there are a couple of things there that I wouldn't mind knowing a little bit more about, really, just to see how the offer is developing around the wider health and social care landscape, if you like.
I think there's probably two parts. So the direct payments is an area where we're not doing so well, or should I put it another way? There's room for improvement. So in comparison with other local authorities, the numbers of direct payments that are being made available to carers, or rather the take-up from carers, is actually quite low. And you see within the report we've identified that, and we're seeking to do something about it. There is also personal health budgets, potential opportunity there, and in respect of the way that personal health budgets can support the health needs of carers, that frankly has not been explored as yet. There is certainly work that's actually going on, I think, at the primary care network level, with some of the work that's actually being done by H4All, we're identifying carers as part of the case management or case finding arrangements at PCN level. But that's actually leading to referrals into Hillingdon, the Hillingdon Carers Support Service, to which the ICB do actually make a contribution.
Right. Sorry, Richard, want to come in?
Just if I can add to what Gary was saying, I mean, I think there are a couple of areas where we can point to some progress, and there's another area that I suspect we should do further work on. The two areas that I think we have made progress is on primary care. That I think in recent times, general practice is flagging when the patient who is calling is themselves a carer and is ringing on behalf of the person that they're caring for, and there is a way of getting better continuity of care with the same GP and the person that is being cared for, and that alongside a time when, as all members will know, we are moving to more episodic care, more digital access to GP appointments, more finding a clinician to see the person who was ringing, rather than necessarily having that continuity of care. For carers, I believe we are better advanced in making sure there's that continuity of care, and that flagging when you are a carer. I think at the point, the second area is at the point of admission to hospital. I think that hospitals are much better at logging who the carer is for the patient who is being admitted, and giving the carer better information as a carer. And I know that at the point of discharge, I mean, we have, with the council, we have 7-day-a-week discharge calls about patients in hospital and ready for discharge. And the carer's needs, the packages of care that will be needed for the patient being discharged, is absolutely full square and centre around the discussions around discharge. Often when the carer themselves is elderly or needs additional support, that being taken into account at the point of discharge of the patient. So I would hope that we would be able to measure progress on those two areas compared to the past. I think from my point of view where we have still got further to go, and I would welcome members' views on this, is where the carer themselves is needing urgent medical attention, perhaps is admitted either to a general hospital or have mental health care needs. And I'm not sure yet that we've got enough safety net backups, perhaps particularly on mental health. We have great crisis facilities for the person needing mental health support. I'm not sure that we've then are able to pick up the person who is therefore left in the lurch because that carer is in hospital, and that's an area I think for us to pay more attention to.
I've got a second question, but I'll wait for others if you like.
Okay, yeah, fine. Okay, sit up.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I just wanted to congratulate you on this report because I think it was so well written. It had lots of information, and actually I concur with the Chair that it was really easy to read. And from a councillor's perspective, I just kind of was able to understand what was going on in the report. So thank you so much for providing that detail and clarity in the report. Obviously, with such a good report, there's obviously things that we can have lots of questions about. So
Don't say that bit.
One of the things that I wanted to pick up on as a particular space in which I've kind of written a lot around is what you've identified as the decline in those who want to be assessed, marrying that up to kind of representation, marrying that up to the ethnicities of people who are actually being claiming, and those who can't, who are not actually an underrepresentation, as we've talked about in here. Taking that on then, I'm just trying to join up the dots here, taking that on to the questions being changed and therefore the understanding of the questions. So what I feel is, from reading this, that there are people who are slipping through the net maybe, and I know that has been identified in your report, but what I haven't seen in the strategy is what we're going to do about that. And I wonder what your thoughts are about that and how the council and the board or whatever will approach that, because it's all very well delivering to people, and I get the delivery to people who are identified as the carers, but there will be communities, and I've used words like stigma and family and extended families and all the other things that come in our diverse communities in Hillingdon, and probably across North West London, I'm sure as well. How are we addressing that? Because we need to capture that information, and we want, especially as Richard has talked about, the bits where we're not where we're slipping up in terms of the backup of the safety of the carers themselves. So kind of, it just feels like it kind of needs to, those dots need to be joined up a little bit. Thank you.
Sorry. I think it's done at this issue is probably tackled at different levels. Part of it is actually about all partners thinking carer, and being geared towards actually identifying carers, and we've touched on that already with particularly with regard to primary care and also hospital, the hospital where there has been notable improvement. The other aspects of it, I think, is actually about going out to communities. And there's actually been, during this year in particular, there's been quite a lot of work with a combination of HRall and Carers Trust, with a series of roadshows across the borough, which is from which they've managed to identify quite a few carers. Carers Trust is also undertaking work in more diverse communities, particularly in the south of the borough. And there are sort of a range of different events held in different parts of the borough where it's about actually going out to the community that enable members of the community to sort of attend, and also going into where people actually are meeting already.
Thank you for that, and I'm really pleased to see that there are events and that actually we're reaching out into communities, because I really feared that when people say that in your report that the applications take too long to actually fill in, therefore what support is given to them, and I wonder if that takes place in those in those community events, to be able to support them and enable them to fill in these application forms so they actually can feel that they are supported as well. And I'm assuming that what you're talking about in terms of primary care needs, that the GP surgeries and that rollout of further GPs having carer leads would enable greater uptake of your assessments more than anything else, which I think is really important in terms of what they need. I will leave it at that for the minute and let somebody else talk. Thank you so much.
If I may, Chair, come to that point. There is an issue around the carers' assessments, and I think they can probably be quite intimidating. So we are actually currently working with Carers Trust at the moment to identify ways of actually making that shorter and less intimidating. We're not quite there yet, but that's something that we should get resolved this year.
Go on, one last.
No, I'm not
okay, fine.
Just making a recommendation that actually these are really important points and questions that you've answered that are not clear in the report whatsoever, and I just feel that if this is going to go to further, that those points are really valuable to be able to, to add to your report, but actually put in the report, because they're asking really vital questions of community, of how we're reaching out into our diverse communities.
I think at the end of this discussion, maybe we'll think about a couple of broad recommendations, which Nikki can then, or what might go into comments for Cabinet. So that's definitely one of them. And then Nikki can write something, we can say that's brilliant. Hopefully, or add to it. But yeah, no, definitely I do want to put in a paragraph about the report, all positives as well as areas that we think could be strengthened as well. So thank you. Rita, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Pooh just asked part of my question anyway. But first of all, thank you very much for a really comprehensive report. And when we said we actually understood it. And it just reiterating what Councillor Pooh has said, in certain communities where you have extended families, they don't see themselves as carers. They just see it as a duty of care. So you could have scenarios where the parents are looking after their parents. The children come home from school, the parents go off to work, and then the children become the carers as well. So my question is related to more with Councillor Punto. How do we engage these communities to say, actually, you are a carer? Because they won't see themselves as carers. They'll see it as duty of care. So that's a really difficult obstacle to get over, to say, actually, you are a carer, because there is a stigma attached in some communities that, I'm not saying it is, but there could be, there's a reason they're not approaching us to say, actually, I need help. So I don't know how we can manage that one.
And it's not sort of thing that's actually going to be solved. I think there will be people that it will not be possible to convince that they're carers, and that's their choice. But there are different ways of approaching it, and with some of the events, as I say, that I've mentioned in response to Councillor Pooter's questions, the staff at Carers Trust are very experienced working with people in the community to explain that what they are actually doing means that they are a carer. However, in terms of actually being able to convince that person to go the next step is really a matter for them. But what can be quite effective is with volunteers from those communities actually going back into their communities to help to actually sort of give their experience, and then the peer support, provide peer support.
finish that off then. So that would be interesting to see in a year's time how much or how far we've progressed in engaging some of the communities to come forward. That would be interesting as some set of figures.
Richard?
Just very quickly on that point, I think it's a really important point, and I was struck by the 3 statutory definitions in paragraph 5 that Gary pulled out. You know, absolutely right, that is what the legislation says, and yet that captures a large proportion, but not the totality of people who are providing care. Because exactly in the examples that you give, or the neighbour next door, or the neighbour round the corner, or the cousin who lives in Leicester, you know, they are also providing that care. But that's not a hope in hell that we can get to capture those and put them on a register and give them an assessment. And I think the community champion work that the council has been doing in partnership with HHCP of looking to embed and to support people within communities themselves who either have got a position of respect or a position of connection in some of the communities that they are, and giving them the information and the signposting that they can give, because often they will know who the carers are for the so-and-so, and just helping to support that fabric of the community, I think is really important in doing what we're all trying to do, which is making sure that vulnerable people are supported, you know, right through that time.
Thanks. June.
Thank you, Chairman. On page 34, on the ethnicity and support of carers, and just reading this and looking at the analysis of those who are self-funding, you've got a very high percentage in the south, but yet a very low percentage in the north. And if you look at it, it states here that, I'm just going by the postcode that is here, the UB, you got 15% out of 784. From HA4, you've got a 4%. And then when you go down at the bottom, the young carers, nearly 23% support lives in Hayes and Harlington, while it's only 1%, just 1% in the north of the borough. Are there, and those are the self-funders, those who get their fundings, receive their own fundings, and then am I reading it in the wrong way? If you can explain that to me first, please.
So, Councillor Nelson, what these figures are referring to is a breakdown of the carers actually being supported by the Carer Support Service. So that's the service where Carers Trust Hillingdon is the lead provider. So these aren't necessarily self-funders. That's people who are actually being supported by the Carer Support Service.
Okay, because I was reading it as a self-funded through the stream that we were pulled on the paperwork here. So thanks.
No, I apologise if I get that.
Microphone, sorry.
I was looking at it through the streams as we go along, but thanks for explaining it's not part of that. Thank you for explaining that. The other one under the census on page 35, you've done a breakdown as well on male and female, and there's a high male percentage here in regards to the support that they get. And what is it about the male carers that don't come through in the system?
It would appear, I think, that male carers are less inclined to consider themselves to be carers than female carers, and I think there would appear to be some reticence to actually more reticence within male carers to actually come forward.
So that's an interesting point. Is there any thought about doing anything about that? Yes, no, great minds, Jude. But yeah, so
There is some work that's, unfortunately, Chairman, there is some work, the task that's actually being undertaken by Carers Trust, but I can't actually remember the details, so I can come back.
No, that would be useful if you could let us know. Thank you. Peter.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered if I could also be a bit of a devil for numbers and detail, and just wondered why we don't break down more granularly younger carers. So I think the difference between a 10-year-old and a 16-year-old is vast. And I'd especially then like to see, and on top of that, I'd also think granular detail for, I'm not saying that people between the ages of 18 and 65 have got it easy, but actually the challenges when you are very young and the challenges when you get older are different. So, how can an 85-year-old provide physical care support, or how can a 10-year-old provide physical care support? It's very broad brush to say that everybody in between 18 and 65 can, and I recognise that. But as a rule, I think we can set that as a parameter that's a fair one to set. Is there opportunity to see that more granular detail, especially for the youngsters, and the types of care that they're having, or the reasons, or I think the reason of providing care can be provided? Is that possible in future?
We can look at that in terms of what the carer support service is actually providing. In terms of the broad data provided through the census, no, that isn't available, and the age breakdown is really determined on the basis of the information that's published. But we can certainly look at more information that's available through the carer support service.
Yeah, thank you. Philip.
Thank you. Thank you. Just coming back on the engagement point, I know we've talked about it a bit. The slight different take on it, really. Gary, we used to talk about the challenges involved in the engagement with limited officer resource time, and obviously Carers Trust has sort of come into being in more recent years, and they've largely embraced that role. I don't think, possibly not wholly, but largely in terms of how we engage with carers. And we've heard also about the work of Hillingdon for All this evening. I suppose I'm interested in how well those engagement mechanisms are working now, given what we've got in place. Because I think that there's always the worry, and I've worked with many of these people, and they're great people, but you just wonder how representative they are of the carer community more generally, and how easy it is for people who aren't connected with them in any way to have any kind of input into this sort of strategy. So I suppose that's my question. Thank you.
Hesitating because it's not actually in these. I think there's I think I pointed out the range of things that are going on. Where I think where I'm heading is that we do have, there are resource constraints as to what can be delivered, and there has to be priorities set out. I think it's. I mean, what I do know is that the work that has been undertaken, the sort of community-based work that has been undertaken, has, some of it has been successful in identifying carers, some of it hasn't. Some of it hasn't identified anyone at all. Apologies, Councillor Cawthorne. Could you repeat the question?
Sorry. Well, I mean, you've already made it. Class B for the Mayor's Charity, won't it? Let's start again. Yeah. So I was talking about how well the new engagement mechanisms were working. So Carers Trust, which has largely taken over that which we were doing years ago as a local authority, Hillingdon for All. How all that's working in terms of the effectiveness of our engagement, and how easily people who aren't connected with them in any way can feed into it, given that they possibly may not always be representative of the carer population as a whole. I hope that helps.
So there are lots of carers who we need to try and help out and reach, but they might not be engaged in this forum, because obviously in forums like this, you get the most engaged people. We know that, don't we, from our world? So, you know, how are we reaching out to those people who wouldn't necessarily engage with this forum? Is that mainly the
helpfully paraphrased? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of that's about also Carers Trust actually going to some existing groups where people are already attending. There are limitations on the extent to which that can be done. I think it might be the committee might actually benefit for us providing more information on this particular aspect for the next report.
Yeah, I think that would be useful. I'm also thinking in my head, maybe for the next time when we look at this again next year, maybe we're thinking about the construct of this meeting, getting some of those people with the Carers Trust involved to talk about those things. Because I agree, those are interesting questions. So something for us to look at in more detail in the future.
Chairman, I was just going to say that Sally Chandler, the Chief Executive of Carers Trust, was actually going to attend the meeting. Unfortunately, she had a clash. But we would certainly look at other partners coming along, because I think the committee would benefit actually hearing from Carers Trust and also some of the constituent organisations within Carers within the Hillingdon Carers Partnership.
Yeah, that would be really good actually. Richard, did you have your hand up?
I mean, I think just to build on what Gary was saying, I mean, it would absolutely be right for Carers Trust Hillingdon and others to come and speak to the committee themselves. I'm not sure if that addresses Councillor Cawthorne's point about other carers groups who may or carer individuals who may or may not be aware of Carers Trust, but we obviously have to start somewhere. I suppose you made me think of coming at it from a different angle, and I mean, I think it was your point as well about it's less about trying to identify the carers, although that is absolutely important. And what we have seen is that there is probably not a single definition of carers, but a real spectrum of who the carers are. But there's maybe something about the sorts of care that they are providing, by and large, to people they love, people they are close to, people in their family, and so forth. And there may be something, and I'd be amazed if Carers Trust haven't already done this, around breaking that down into personal care, into administrative and financial care, into transport care, all some fairly simple headings. And actually that could quite easily help that, the 10-year-olds can't drive them to the hospital, but perhaps can access some simple translation support and so on. And some personal care is appropriate for the young person to do, and some personal care absolutely not appropriate for the young person to do. And that might be another grid that we could be laying over the range of services, so that we can collectively be sure that we're talking to the individual carers and the service users and some of the voluntary organisations about the same currency of daily life that we're interested in.
Yeah, no, that all sounds good. Tony.
Thank you, Chair. Excellent report, Gary. As the others have been saying, very clear, and the case studies are very interesting and very good. But just on the delivery plan update on the outcome, it's a little bit disappointed about the GP practices not all engaging. And perhaps you could give us ideas of how you're nudging them, because it's obviously dropped down to 33 now. And what we're doing, because it's, every GP practice is going to be dealing with carers, and I'd be interested to know. And also, what we're saying about engaging with the carers themselves. Might be interesting here for some young carers. It's very interesting to read about the schools, what's going on in the schools. I mean, in my day at Countess School, the thought of identifying as a young carer, you'd never dream of doing it. But it's interesting how it's working, and it's good to see the scheme, particularly at Oakwood, that's working. And the Carers Trust are obviously working, I think, with 12 schools. Are there plans for them to work with any more? Do we know? been just interesting.
Councillor Bells, there are intentions for them to work with additional schools. Going back to the point about the extension of the carer leads in GP practices, it's something that the Confederation is actually working on in partnership with Carers Trust. Carers Trust can provide advice and information, but the Confederation is the sort of the lead organisation as far as the practices are concerned. Can't compel the practices to do it. It's about persuasion. Did you want to?
I mean, if I may just pick up on that. I mean, I picked that up as Gary was taking us through the report, and I'd certainly like to revisit that with the Confederation and the primary care networks. I suspect that this is as much about the question being asked as the definition of the answer. I believe that almost every practice would have identified carer leads, even though they wouldn't necessarily say so in the questionnaire. And we just need to test that out and work through the patient participation groups and so. But I absolutely agree with you. We ought to be aiming for 100% and ought to be aiming for it soon.
Yeah, I'll just say you're missing a big chunk of people if you're not identifying them.
Thank you, Tony. Right. So we've almost been on an hour on this topic, and I've got June and Peter who want to come back in again, which is absolutely fine. But I'm going to guillotine it after them, if that's okay with everybody else, because it's one of those topics that you could talk a long time about. So, but June, you're next.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a very emotive subject that I think that all of us get involved in or seen or heard. So to get this information is very important that we also understand what it's all about. So when we do go out into the community, we can say, okay, this is what the council is doing, this is what they're doing, working with the local authorities and the local health providers. Gary, on page 37, you've got a figure of carers who decline assessment. And we got in 2021-22, 81% was offered the assessment and declined. So 2022-23, 77% assessment offered during this period and was refused. Can you tell us why? Why is this? Why was this decline?
We don't actually record the reason. I think I go on page 38, they sort of anecdotally the reasons that we've actually been getting. I think that, I mean, interestingly, some feedback that we've had recently from carers is that there's also a concern amongst some carers about what will be expected of them if they actually identify themselves as a carer, and expectation that they will actually be required to do more than they're really willing to do, and I think that actually, again, that it would appear from the feedback that we're getting that is something that deters some carers from having an assessment. Suffice it to say, a carer's assessment isn't necessary for people to be able to access some support through the carer support service. So, and the offer that we have in Hillingdon, I think, is good in comparison with what's available in other boroughs.
I think actually, in terms of our recommendations to Cabinet, I think maybe mentioning this is a possible useful thing to be done in the future. Obviously it depends on logistics and finances, but understanding why people are saying no, I think is very important. You know, so I think that we could put that in as potentially one of the things we put in as recommendations to Cabinet on this. Okay, thanks, June. Peter.
Thank you, Chair. Actually leads a little bit on from Richard's point. It's on page page 33 for me, but it could be, mine aren't numbered, I'm doing mine on the screen. 64% of carers are satisfied with the support and the care services they receive for themselves and the person they care for. It's the third best of our 8 comparable boroughs, and 71% is the highest. I guess my question is around, do we have a breakdown of the types of care that is? Because that's quite a broad statement to make. You know, are we really good at supporting people with mental health care, but particularly bad with supporting people with physical needs? I've not got a clue, and I guess that will help for this strategy and for the goals and the objectives that we set as a council and you set as health professionals to understand that. Can we get that? Is that level of data available? Can we be that granular? And if not, how can we support that to make that happen? Because ultimately, I think that will help us support carers an awful lot better. Because as we've discussed, it's a big thing, it's a broad thing. Not just age, but types and satisfaction.
So that comparative data actually comes from the SALT return and limited into how far we can actually break that down. I will recheck that just to make sure, but my thoughts are that I'm not sure we're actually able to go into that level of comparative detail. I mean, that will change once we actually move over to the client level data, but as I say, it's going to be sort of back end of next year before we actually have comparative information available on that basis. But I will check that.
Yeah. And this is me not being a member of this committee, and potentially I'm just going to be slightly ignorant. Is that something that we can control in gathering that data, or is that because it's the census data, national data?
It's the SALT data is nationally determined. It's directed by the Department of Health and Social Care.
Richard?
Just very quickly on that point, I mean, I'd be amazed if the Carers Trust don't have specific information locally about what a lot of our members tell us they don't get support with is X, whereas most of our members tell us they're happy with Y. So I think it just emphasises the point about the value of bringing them in for the next time we discuss it with the committee.
I mean, from our perspective, I think understanding how this sort of information drives decisions and priorities, I think, is very useful. So, no, thank you so much, everyone. That was a really interesting topic, and we could have gone on for longer. I think 2 things. Firstly, Nikki, if you could come up with a couple of paragraphs for us to send to Cabinet based on the issues we raised here, we can circulate it and then obviously edit it online between ourselves. So thank you very much.
You want it to all members, circulate to all members?
Yeah, circulate to all members, because then we can sort of, adapt it and so it goes to Cabinet. Secondly, I think, yes, when we look at this again, probably next year, yes, thinking about how we construct the meeting with the Carers Trust and maybe some others, such as the schools or whoever, who can give us some of these answers to these questions that we've been raised, would be very interesting. So, but thank you very much. Very interesting, a good report, as we keep on saying, Gary, and thank you for the chat on this. Okay, right. So we're going to move now to our next agenda item, which is the 2023-25 Better Care Fund Section 75 agreement, and Gary and Richard, you're doing this again, so the double bonanza. So if you'd like to say a couple of words about this, and then we'll move into questions. Thanks, Gary.
Yes, it's me again, Chairman.
That's a good thing.
And once again, apologise for the length of the report, as unfortunately it is the nature of the beast. Just as a reminder to the committee, the Better Care Fund is a national initiative. I think you may recall when I brought it to the committee last year. 2 objectives, main objectives: enabling people to stay well, safe, independent at home for longer, which is the prevention objective, and the second, about right care in the right place at the right time, is mainly focused on hospital discharge. I think some key points to highlight with this. Some of the main changes for this year. Or first of all, to say that the actual plan that we were required to prepare was for 2 years. The Section 75 agreement, the function of, or the purpose of which, is to give legal effect to the partnership and financial arrangements within the plan. The requirement was just for 1 year. What Cabinet has approved is 1 year with the option to extend for a further year. So key changes with this one is with the 23-24 plan is the adults focus. So all of the metrics and the guidance related to the requirements of the plan were focused on the 18 and over population. That has meant that a scheme that we had within our previous plan related to integrated care and support for children and young people has come out. That doesn't mean that work stops happening. It just means that it's not actually covered by the BCF plan. And what we will be looking at doing is capturing those financial arrangements within the Section 75 as an amendment. Important point to flag up to the committee is the review of BCF schemes that has been instigated by the North West London Integrated Care Board. Frankly, this is something that we actually wanted to look at ourselves anyway. This is actually about ensuring, sort of reviewing schemes within the BCF as well as all out-of-hospital services that are provided in Hillingdon to ensure that the schemes that we have in place are the right ones, that there isn't actually duplication of service provision, and then reshaping the plan or updating the plan for 24-25. And what I would expect is that we will actually be doing a revision probably early in Q4. What the key change to the plan includes this year as well is the strengthening of capacity around mental health discharges. Within the report, I've actually set out examples of delegation of functions. So where the local authority is undertaking health responsibilities, or the health service is undertaking local authority social care responsibilities, that requires legal authority under a Section 75 agreement, and you can see within the report on pages 64 and 65 examples of where that's actually covered by the plan. Many of the other key features of the legal agreement are pretty much the same as they were last year. What I have done within the report is I've actually included the national metrics and the Q2 position, and I think there's a couple where Q2 data is suggesting that we're not on track. With one of those, which is on 68, is the discharge to usual place of residence. Our actual performance against that isn't far adrift from the actual measure. The second one, which is on 67, the permanent admissions to care homes, we are somewhat adrift from the target, and that's really explained within the report and linked to the higher levels of need and complexity, increasing numbers of older people with frailty, and we believe that that's actually part of the COVID legacy. Another point I think to identify is that we've come under a considerable amount of scrutiny for this. The monitoring requirements for this year have actually been quite considerable. I've set out what they are in the report, and that is likely to continue going forward. Chairman, I'll leave it to that, and again, if the committee has any queries.
Thank you very much. I have one question really, and it's around the sort of the decision making we can make locally to spend this money. I mean, how much sort of agency and flexibility do we have? And I suppose when I say we, it's obviously there's we as a council, but Richard as well as the ICS. You know, maybe within answering that question as well, Richard, you can explain a bit how the ICS gets involved in this, because a lot of money, but I wonder how much of it, how much agency we have in spending it locally.
Shall I begin to answer that and hand over to Gary? And can I be the first to thank and congratulate Gary on such a clear and substantive report, both on the Better Care Fund and the Section 75. And there's quite a neat connection, I think, and overlap with the previous report, because clearly some of the funding in the BCF goes to carer support. I think the answer to your question, Chair, is there is a limited local flexibility, and we in Hillingdon, and I'm sure other local authorities, have sought, obviously, to maximise that local flexibility as far as we can. And Gary's been extremely skillful with other senior officers in helping us negotiate that. And I say that because clearly the Better Care Fund is a national template, it's a national requirement with very clear national metrics, and some of that is consistent year on year, some of it often makes rather strange changes year on year, but there are national policy requirements that we are required to deliver. I think what is interesting in this first year of the establishment of an integrated care board across the 8 local authorities within North West London was that the integrated care board took the decision to review the 8 Better Care Fund agreements across the local authorities to seek some sort of consistency between the 8. And we can absolutely understand why they might want to do that. It's something that the national BCF monitoring team, assurance team, also do in terms of reviewing the Hillingdon agreement against the national requirements. But the ICB thought it was important to review for consistency.
Sorry, Richie, can I just interrupt you? What does consistency mean? Because consistency can mean lots of different things. Consistency could be reaching a certain level of performance depending on need, or consistency could mean dealing exactly the same service across every single area. What does consistency mean?
I think I'm right in saying that we haven't quite defined that, Chair, but you've once again pointed out unerringly one issue around it, and it reminded me of the discussion earlier on, when clearly as a local authority you would want to seek consistency for all 310,000 residents, but recognising that within that there are specific wards, specific communities with different communities who clearly need different approaches. And that's something that we have tried to do in partnership in Hillingdon. I think that the Integrated Care Board recognise the differences between the 2.5 million residents in the ICB and the different communities between Hillingdon and other local authorities and within Hillingdon. But perhaps not surprisingly, they haven't quite found a way of managing those different those differences in a consistent way, to coin a phrase. But you're absolutely right. That, I think, will be the meat of the review that they are seeking to do for the 24-25 Better Care Fund agreements. And I'm sure that we locally, with Gary and senior officers, will want to be ensuring that Hillingdon's interests and Hillingdon community's interests are protected in that. I think that what was really reassuring to me about the Integrated Care Board's review, in as far as they could, in as far as they had the time to review this year, was that the Hillingdon Better Care Fund proposals this year and, similarly over the last 5 years or so, absolutely came through with flying colours through that review. They asked us to make one or two changes.
That's partly why I'm worried about consistency being sought across the 8 areas.
And I suppose in that sense, the standards and the expectations that the Integrated Care Board had, in other words, were we applying the national criteria and conditions for what was funded either by the NHS contribution or by the local authority contribution, were those met and were those clearly transparent to external assessors, just as we would have done internally to check that, just as we would have done to the National Assessment Team. So that came through with flying colours, and that really reassured me in the sense that I've got no doubt that we will succeed to do that in subsequent years. I think the only other point that I would make is that a couple of the services listed, I think it's page 64 on the delegated functions. One of the values of that Integrated Care Board review was, for instance, the bridging care service that we're particularly proud of and have been running for a number of years between the local authority of social care, the hospital and community services, has proved our hospital discharge to be very smooth by and large for patients, and that the Integrated Care Board have asked every borough to introduce a similar bridging service in their patch where they do not have one. So I think it was satisfying to show that not only the services we were investing in for local communities seemed to be the right ones, but also the actual processes by which we were doing it were validated. I don't know that I've answered your question, but
you give some good content and context, Richard. Thank you, Gary. What's your view about the agency we have locally within the Better Care Fund agreement?
The Better Care Fund actually contains different funding streams. There's probably less agency over the additional Integrated Care Board contribution, and what we've noticed this year is that some of the funding, some of the additional voluntary contribution fundings come out. The services haven't necessarily stopped, but they've just not been included within the Better Care Fund. A key funding stream for adult social care is the minimum contribution to adult social care, and I think that we would certainly have much more agency over how that is spent. I mean, as it is, we've been very transparent. And all of the items are very clear, and that's been recognised by the ICB, and everything that we've got included within that does actually have a positive impact on the rest of the health and care system. Or to put it another way, if we weren't doing that, it would actually have quite a negative impact on the health and care system.
Thank you, Philip.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Gary. Again, good report, completely agree. There's loads of good stuff here, and I like the extent of our ambition as the years progress within the BCF. Mild criticism, I suppose, and Gary, you've heard me say this before. These reports can feel just a little bit dry, to be honest. And bearing in mind there are people watching this, no doubt emailing us later saying, why didn't you ask this, that or the other, or put them on the spot over that. It's the usual thing we get, isn't it, Chairman? I suppose, and given that the whole Section 75 agreement is designed to drive innovation, integration and all of that creativity, I wonder if you can perhaps bring it to life with an example or two maybe of an actual practical example of that in action, perhaps either in the context of the current agreement or the new one that's proposed, just to give it put a little bit more flesh on the bone, perhaps with one or two examples. Thank you.
I think the Councillor Calder, the Section 75 is going to be a dry document because it's just giving the legal sanction to the things that are actually in the within the plan. And in terms of the interrelationship, I think, between health and social care, some of the things that are actually mentioned on pages 64 and 65, they actually highlight, I think, some quite important areas of that interrelationship. There is a number of other areas in terms of posts which are actually funded, which have an impact. What I was saying earlier around mental health discharge. So some of the additional capacity that are being provided there will actually help to assist to reduce time spent in hospital of people with mental health needs.
Richard, yeah.
I mean, thank you. I mean, I think to build on that, I think the list on my page 70, paragraph 35, some of the additions this year. Gary has mentioned the integrated discharge team and the support to older people in facilitating those discharges. The additional approved mental health professionals, which we've talked about in this committee before, around people with mental health crisis at the emergency department of THH, and really supporting their assessment and their next step. And I think in particular around Scheme 3, the additional funding of short-term block contract for nursing care. Is that innovative? Perhaps not so much, but I think the additional injection and improved capacity that the local authority was leading on for that was enormously helpful in supporting fast discharge and getting the right patients to the right place.
Can I just come back and thank you for that response? I do hope you didn't take my comment amiss, Gary. It was, you're absolutely right. I mean, by their very nature, these things can be a bit formulaic, but we should never forget that we're here to represent the people who in our residents and in our wards, and obviously the service experience they get is an important thing. So, but that's a helpful answer. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh yeah, thanks, Gary. Yeah.
I should have get the hang of this by now, really. What I can certainly do, I think, was one of my. I think the takeaway from the discussion is actually putting some more tangible examples of what it actually means into the future reports, because I will be coming back with the sequel.
Excellent. Yeah. No. I mean, generally we look for what this means in practice for people here. And that's fine. So yes, that'll be quite often sequels aren't better than the originals, but it sounds like your sequel on this will be better than the original. So thank you for that. Cecil, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, I agree with Councillor Cawthorne on that, because I think that it would be just for us, because it's quite an intense report. It's quite a lot of information to digest, and sometimes those case studies like that was in the previous report, whilst it is a Section 75, I understand what it needs to do, but the add-ons at the end or somewhere just to illustrate it for us might help us better understand certain things. So thank you for being able to do that. I just wanted to ask some clarity, because what concerned me when I read this report was it almost felt like tinkering on something that was working previously to have a new way of doing something. And this funding that's been removed from the voluntary sector to then be allocated in different spaces of the voluntary sector who, in this case, historically are excellent at what they provide in terms of that specialist need. Who provides it? Where does it go? What's happening with that money? And yeah.
Rich, you had your hand up first. Do you want to go first? Or?
I'm hoping Gary and I would say the same thing. Can I just be sure that you're talking about contributions to the voluntary sector or the voluntary contribution from the NHS to the VCF? Because the two are slightly different.
Which page?
Page 70. And I was reading, so the summary of financial changes, and then you had the contributions, which go, but it says in point 36, it says, in addition to the services within the former integrated care and support for children and young people, so this has been removed, which you mentioned earlier, but then it also says that 905 core funding for voluntary and community organisations such as Age UK, Carers Trust Hillingdon, Disabled Association Hillingdon and Hillingdon Minds. So these are all the things that, you know, these are specialist organisations that provide quite key care. And in my experience, when you take away their funding and put it into a different organisation, those organisations go back to those charities and you've got a middleman trading going on.
That's apologies if that's the impression that you've got for this, because that's not what was actually meant. So what we're doing, it doesn't necessarily mean that the money is actually being taken away from those organisations. What it means is that we're moving to a different model of provision. So rather than actually having grant-funded organisations, we're moving towards commissioned services. And a good example there will be with the Carers Trust, or rather the Carer Support Service. So what we're actually seeking to do is to actually go to market for a longer term contract of up to 8 years, and that's pretty much the approach that we're looking at taking with some of the other services being delivered by the voluntary sector organisations, to actually provide them with longer term contracts. One of the difficulties with the grants was that it was an annual cycle. It will actually help to give more stability.
Yeah, because the way the paragraph is drafted, it sounds like this money is just being removed from them. So just for future reference, I mean, obviously, does that mean it's being completely removed, or if not, you know, what does that mean? I think that's a very good point that's being made. So something that could be sort of explained would be useful.
Sorry, to just then take on, thank you for that clarification. I really appreciate that. And then in a grant-based service, there is always that approach of annual review, because people have to come back and they have to set their stalls again. And I appreciate the longer-term contract for stability, but how does that review? Because it's almost like a procurement process then. So how does that assessment take place on service care and provision provided? If you know, is there an annual kind of review, or what do they come back? Is there metrics that they have to be assessed on, or what happens at that stage when it goes down to a commissioned or procurement kind of contract with these charities?
So what we would be talking about is organisations actually having a contract. So we would need to undertake procurement exercise because the public procurement regulations require it. So what the contract would actually include, or the specification will include, is setting out metrics, and the contract would actually set out a contract management process. So depending on the value of the contract would determine the review period or the contract management period. So the larger the sums of money involved, the more frequent the monitoring. So it'd be, spring quarterly, large amounts of money, you'd expect it to be quarterly.
June.
Thank you. On page 109, can you explain something to me about the pool budget? From my understanding of looking at this, the borough put in 58,720, and ICB contribution and ICB additional contribution also got triple figures in there. What happens if someone is discharged from a hospital and the amount of time allocated for interim care at home? That interim care can either be some support in either getting physio or some support in reallocating themselves back into their home. So I am assuming that this funding, the pool budget, goes into there. If that individual resident needed a longer term input, does it come out from the pool budget, or is it funded from ICB or ICB additional? Just a clarification for my head, so I can understand where we're at with this, with the pool budget, because it seems a very small amount here from the London Borough of Hillingdon.
Can I just clarify, Councillor Nelson, what page you're on?
Page 109.
Yeah, it's 49 of the papers, 109 of our pack, I think, yeah.
Oh yes, yeah. So what you're looking at here on this page is the actual contributions to specific services. So these are block contracts for step down beds. So the length of stay within these facilities, we would look at trying to keep down to a minimum, so around 4 weeks. If it's longer, then that doesn't impact in terms of financial cost to the individual. These figures are all about the costs between the council and the ICB of actually delivering these services. It's not to do with any financial contribution from individual residents.
Sorry, Gary. The reason I ask that question, because I'm aware sometimes residents do get concerned when they discharge home and they needed additional services. They're concerned about the financial impact when that assessment is made with an individual, whether they will be able to continue. Oh, shush. Whether they will be able to continue that care, or whether it will be supported with fundings either from, which they wouldn't get from the the NHS package, but will be in regards to either social services involvement or the council involvement on that. And that's why I wanted to know clearly what that is, because it's a big concern for some residents being discharged from hospital and having to be told about additional care, because when their assessment is done, they're told that, okay, you're going to get 2, 3, 4, 5, 2 to 3 weeks help and assistance with no cost. But then after that, there will be a cost implication. Where would that cost come from? And a lot of our residents are very concerned about that.
That actually comes down to the statutory framework under the Care Act for social care. So what will happen? The services that are covered by this particular schedule are actually short term. So they are to help people to step down from hospital once they no longer actually need to be within those services. Whilst they're in those services, they would be assessed. Their longer term care needs would actually be assessed. Those longer term care needs will actually be subject to a financial assessment because they're subject to a financial contribution. That's the law. So understand the anxiety that actually causes some of our residents, but that's actually the legal framework for adult social care.
So the pool budget is
Mike?
No.
Sorry. The pool budget is nothing to do with that. It's just the additional part.
The funding that's actually in the pool budget is actually for in this particular schedule is covering some of those services that actually enable people to step down from hospital, but they are short term. And during in this particular instance, we're looking at bed-based services. So whilst they're in those bed-based services, their long-term care needs would actually be assessed. But once they actually move into those long-term care services, they would be subject to a financial contribution, which what they actually have to contribute depends on their actual resources.
Thank you for clarifying.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Tony?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, good report. It's heavy stuff, but sort of tells you about that there's not a lot of bed blocking going on. Basically, this is one of the things it's telling us. But what I was wondering, my main question was on the page 69 of our report. There's the financial contributions from funding streams, and there's a couple of them have got asterisks by them. The additional NHS contribution and the ICB discharge fund, and it's subject to a review of out-of-hospital services, etc. Obviously, because they're large chunks of money. When do we know when we're going to get them, or if we're going to get them?
Chairman, that actually refers back to what I was saying during my introduction about the review of BCS schemes and out-of-hospital services. So hopefully we'd have a result January, I think, probably, or December. Well, January, considering December's around the corner.
Okay, I mean, it's a contingency for if one of them figures has to change or anything. I mean, would it throw us out?
Well, that would actually be all considered part of the review process. I think that there's probably less likelihood of there being change in 24-25. I mean, what's actually coming out of the ICB at the moment is that any major change was likely to take place from April 2025. Changes that would actually be put into effect earlier than that would really be aligned with opportunities presented. So, say for example, if contracts are actually coming to an end. We don't know for definite, but I should imagine that the funding may not necessarily actually change that much for 24-25.
And just further on from Sitow's, Councillor Punder's question about the commissioning. How is that going? It says it's a transitional year this year, but I mean they're quite detailed things to deal with contracts, etc. And have you got every faith that the groups can take them on, can take on these the contracted work?
For the sorry, Councillor Bells, were you referring to the voluntary sector?
Yes. Sorry, the voluntary sector.
Yes, well, the plans are actually being put in place, and we're looking at. In fact, I think they're for some that have already been put in place up until the end of March 2025. So the procurement exercise will take place in 24-25, with a view to any new contracts then starting from the beginning of the next financial year.
Thanks. Sorry, I was just wondering at a certain point, but I'll share it with everyone later. Wasn't that interesting? That's all for now. Fantastic. Okay. Oh, Peter.
Chair, it was just an observation. Obviously, a lot of this is measured against national metrics, is my understanding, to work out where we are on what seems like a traffic light system. Obviously, what's going on in Cornwall is probably a little bit different to what's going on in Hillingdon, given the demographics, where the provision of healthcare is, the types of healthcare, the types of people. Is there any and is it appropriate? Is there any comparative data to likewise boroughs, neighbouring boroughs, or comparative there that potentially is missing from this report? Because whilst you don't want to see something in amber or red, if all local authorities around here are in amber and red, whilst that's not great, it starts to create a picture and helps you to understand it, and maybe doesn't get you to panic completely. But if we were the only ones who were amber, or even better, we're the only ones who were in green, for the various bits of commentary that are there and the various quarter two positions, I'd just be interested to know whether that data is available and whether we ever publish that anywhere.
The comparative data against the national metrics will be available. It's not actually published yet, but it will be available, and we can certainly provide it to the committee. And I mean, what I would aim to do for future reports as part of the performance aspect of the report is to show Hillingdon's position in context.
Great, good stuff. Well, thanks very much, Richard and Gary, for those two items. You're free to leave now, but those both of them have been very interesting. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right. Okay. So next agenda item is the Cabinet Forward Plan. Does anybody have any comments on this? No? Excellent. So we can move on to our final one, which is the work programme. I've got a couple of things to mention on the work programme. Firstly, we put in a provisional meeting for December, on December the 18th, in case we needed it. There's nothing there, so I don't think we do need it. So I was going to propose that we don't meet. Yes. On purpose, we've been trying to avoid putting in things there, because it was a provisional one. So, yeah, okay, I think I'll take that as agreement to take that one out. That's fantastic. Secondly, just a quick update in terms of our review. Nikki sent our recommendations out to all the stakeholders, essentially, who attended the witness sessions. We got a bit of feedback, not too much, but generally some minor changes, really. So the recommendations really are as they were. So me and Cyril will be meeting, is it next week, as a Labour lead, just to discuss how the report will go underneath those, and then Nikki's she's already started writing actually. So the final report will be ready for January, but the recommendations are basically as we agreed at the last meeting. So I just thought I'd like to let everyone know. And thirdly, and this is off the top of my head, which is always dangerous, but as well as whispering to Nikki about, because I think the questions that especially Tony and Cyril you were putting sort of obviously come into the area of how we're changing, giving money essentially to our volunteer organisations. Now, lots of those volunteer organisations touch upon stuff to do with health and social care. So I was wondering, and this is a very sort of broad thought that Nikki can work on. I was looking at our work plan for April seems quite light at the moment. Maybe we could think about coming up with something to do with looking about how the new funding arrangements from the voluntary sector for those in obviously in the areas that touch health and social care, how those sort of work and how it's working as well. Because obviously, a lot of it's a very interesting, as you said, local close to people, delivery is very important, but also accountability is important. So getting a bit of better understanding of how that works in our area would be useful. So it's a bit garbled, but we've come up with something better. But maybe in April, if we can maybe have a little look at that. Is the committee happy with that? Microphone. We are still live, so do not swear. And put on your mic. Can you put on your microphone, please? Thank you very much.
Offline, Chairman.
Yes. Right. Okay. Fair enough. Not enough. So that was my one extra thought, really, that just came up in the meeting. So we're happy with that. Any other views on the work plan?
I suppose it can be online. We did discuss about procurement, that we would look at that too as well. Is that still part of our line on Trail of Thoughts?
So we had, basically we had something on procurement. Was it something like last September? About a year ago, we had something on procurement, which was interesting, but we haven't followed up from that. So we could either think, is that relevant with the other thing that I was talking about, or if we want to have a look at it again, we could have a look at it again. But something to think about, because I think we looked at it about a year and a bit ago, didn't we?
It was definitely a while back.
Yeah, it was a while back, so maybe something to look at again. You're right. Great. Okay. Are we all happy now?
Yeah.
Yep, fantastic. Okay, the meeting is now closed.